Hello everyone, thank you for joining us on yet another intriguing and exciting episode of our program series developing resilient global trade systems on Amorgate Radio Communications. I remain your host Titilola Ogushono. It is indeed another beautiful Friday evening, and today we'll be discussing another interesting topic titled Building Resilient Trade Systems, the Power of Public-Private Partnerships. I want to thank everyone who has joined on this program from the start of this quarter, and other programs of my colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've been enjoying yourself and learning one or two things. Today will not be an exception because we'll be discussing another interesting, informative topic. Let me ask you this question. What happens when a major port shuts down, or a power outage disrupts manufacturing, or a critical transport corridor becomes impassable? In a world where global trade depends on seamless connections, even a small disruption can have far-reaching consequences. Of course, I'm sure that it is food for thought for us. Okay, yet in today's interconnected world, trade systems are increasingly vulnerable to disruptions ranging from climate shocks to geopolitical tensions to supply chain bottlenecks and even infrastructure deficits. This has reminded us that resilient trade systems are no longer what we call luxury, but rather they become necessities. And more worrisome is coming back to the African continent. The AFDP has said that Africa has an annual infrastructure financing gap of between $68 billion to about $108 US. And if you look at that range, $8 billion to $108 billion is quite a huge deficit. So for a continent like Africa, where infrastructure remains a major constraint to trade, thus finding sustainable solutions have become more urgent than ever. One solution gaining momentum across the continent is the public-private partnership, popularly known as the PPP. These partnerships bring governments and businesses together to finance, build, and operate critical infrastructure in the economy. So rather than relying solely on public budgets, the PPPs harness private investments and expertise to deliver projects that improve connectivity, reduce cost, and strengthen economic resilience. So what we're doing today, this particular episode, is that we'll be examining how public-private partnerships, the PPPs, are reshaping Africa's trade landscape. We will consider what PPPs mean, look at the key features of PPP, the various models in Africa, the advantages, of these models, and also be citing relevant examples across the continent of Africa. So today we'll be discussing the power of public-private partnerships with particular focus, zooming our lenses on the African continent. So when we say PPP, the public-private partnerships, what do we mean? This refers to collaborative agreement between government entities and the private sector, and this is usually aimed at funding, building, and operating projects that serve the public interest. And this partnership leverage on the strength of both sectors, that is the public sector providing oversight and the private sector contributing the capital, the funds, efficiency, and expertise. Now, what do we mean when we say the PPP? Furthermore, it's also a contracted agreement between the government and the private sector partner. You have so that two sectors involve: the public entity, the government, the public sector, and the private partners, or the private sector or the private company or the private firm. So the government retains ownership of the facility, while the private partner or the firm does almost everything else, which could involve building, fixing, maintaining, managing, depending on the model. However, the right over this project or the facility or the system largely remains with the government. But the private entity has some negotiation room when it comes to project completion, and both parties usually share in the profit generated from the completed project. And this PPP contract could actually span over decades, 10 years, a decade, 2, 20, 30. It depends on the terms of the contract. And globally, if you look at the overview of these, PPPs have become a critical tool for bridging the infrastructure gaps, especially on the continent of Africa, with that huge deficit that we have mentioned as recorded by the AFDB, and improving public services and also stimulating economic growth. Within the supply chain sectors, the PPPs are designed to enhance efficiency level of reliability, sustainability, and these elements are critical, essential, crucial for economic integration and trade within African communities. And it should be noted that these PPPs are usually long-term in nature, long-term contracts between the entities, and usually the private party usually bears the significant risk and management responsibility, and more often than not we have remuneration being linked to performance. To what we have said, we realize that the two sectors involve, the private and the public sector. We have them, the synergy, coming together to carry out infrastructure projects in the economy. And it's very important because whether like it or not, with this huge deficit gap, that various models can be one, intervention can be one, but one that is gaining momentum on the African continent is this arrangement, the PPP. And let's look at the key features of the PPP, why we have countries, economies around the African continent, even around the globe, adopting this approach. And the first is the risk sharing and transfer, or allocation. You see that optimal risk sharing and allocation are for the party that can best manage them. So in this kind of arrangement, we looking at the risk involved in a particular project, and once you identify the risk, the party who is best suited to handle that risk would take over. So the risk will go to the party best suited to handle them. Usually what we see the public sector taking, the government entity taking, is that the risk that they take the political and regulatory risk. They take care of that. They look at it. They have policies to mitigate this risk. Is within their purview. And the private sector takes more of the construction, the demand, and the operational risk. So if there is low demand for that facility, there's a loss element, the person who takes care of it is the private sector. And because from the level of efficiency, the way it is structured is more of a performance-driven environment, you realize that are better structured to take up this kind of risk. Now, are there examples around this? Yes, we have the Lekki-Epe Expressway in Lagos, Nigeria, when government handled the land acquisition and the right of way. That's what government handled majorly in this arrangement. And we have the Lekki Construction Company who took over the traffic volume risk. And when the toll revenue was low on the onset, initially at the offset, definitely it was this private sector that took more of the risk, not the government. Okay, and that's one of the key features of the PPP. You identify what you are best suited for. The government looking at the political and regulatory environment, while the private sector, the private entity, the private firm are very good with their sensitivity analysis, the SWOT analysis, the business analysis, the marketing mix analysis. They are good with all of that. They take care of that. So you talk about expertise and experience meeting together, where you are best suited for it. It's always better. So you have two bodies coming together so you can have the best of both worlds. Okay, that's one of the features of the PPP. Let's look at another one, is that it is a long-term contract. Most times, because they're capital intensive, is not usually a short-term contract. The nature is really long-term, and sometimes you have you should quote when we talk about the different models that we have on the continent of Africa. Okay, but we talking about the long-term contract. I want to cite the DBFOM model. That is, the D is the design, the B for build, the F for finance, O for operate, and M for maintain. So the design, the build, finance, operate, and maintain model. So you're talking about an arrangement where the private entity will design, will build, will finance, operate, and also maintain the facility or the system or that project. Okay, and what it does is aligns the incentives of quality, because the private firm would maintain what it builds. That's interesting thing. Okay, the maintenance culture is usually very high in the private sector. We have countries now being deliberate about maintaining that. Okay, but one of the features of the PPP we're talking about is a long-term contract. Okay, and we have the Thika Highway in Kenya, the 50-kilometer highway upgraded under the PPP. Okay, the contractor maintains the road for years after being built, and payment is tied to road quality and not just construction. So that depends on the time of the arrangement that you decide to choose as a nation, as a country. So it's interesting that it's not just construction. It doesn't end with you just constructing. Okay, it's more about you construct, then you maintain, because you're going to construct and maintain. You're not likely to use inferior materials. You're not likely to do wishy-washy job, likely to put in your best. So one of the key features of the PPP is that it's long-term contract, and that various models that you can adopt looking at what suits you as a nation. Okay, let's look at another feature of the PPP. Of course, when you look at these features, you begin to wonder, this is why countries are adopting the PPP. We have the private capital or the off-balance sheet financing. So the private sector usually provides funds upfront for investment. So the government is not going to be saddled with the pressure for fiscal measure. It's not going to be saddled with the pressure of the upfront payment for investment. That takes it off from government. So it eases, the fiscal pressure on government. We have example, the Azura Edo IPP power plant. It took about 900 million to be funded by private investors and the DFIs. Okay, and what the federal government usually pays also for power delivered via the PPA, but the upfront payment being absorbed by the private investors. So that's another feature of the PPP. Now, is there any other one? We talked about the fourth one. We talked about 6 features, so we're on the fourth one right now. We have is a performance or output based system, and this, it's because it's not just the public sector now. It has a fusion of the public sector, collaboration of the public sector and the private sector. So, and if you ask me, I like this. It's not just you, whether it's not a question of you just doing it for doing it. It's a question of you doing it for accountability and reliability's sake. Okay, government pays for service or for availability. So it means that there's a decline or drop in service, payment is deducted, and that helps. It brings about reliability, level of reliability. It brings a level of excellence. You want to apply that when you are dealing in this kind of arrangement. Of course, we have the gold train in South Africa, when the Popandia consortium operates their trains. Okay, and provincial government pays availability fee only, and which I like when I looked at that report, when trains run on time and stations are clean. Okay, so it means that when you deliver optimal service, efficient service, then you get the payment. But in this case, once there is a drop in quality of service, the standard, poor service, definitely there'll be penalty for it. That's one of the advantages, or one of the key features, peculiarity, what distinctive feature of the PPP, which I like, if you ask me. So let's look at another future of the PPP. I told you it's a very interesting, engaging topic. It's something that we relate with and we'll be seeing around happening on the continent. Okay, is that it has high level of innovation, and there's a whole life efficiency level. There is an increase in the efficiency level and brings in high level of innovation. Now, this kind of arrangement allows the private firm to deploy efficient measures, models that will save costs, and you see that from the design, you want to save cost saving designs. And have you seen this being experimented across the continent? Oh yes, I looked at the one independent power plant in Ghana. We have the private operation. They installed efficient turbines, the waste heat recovery, and this reduced fuel costs over the 25-year life cycle. You know why? Because in this kind of arrangement, the operator, that is the private entity, pays the fuel bill. So definitely, this arrangement allows the private firm to deploy innovative measures to cut costs reasonably, to eliminate unnecessary waste. It really helps, and it goes back to level of efficiency of a nation. And I keep saying something, I said that a lot that no nation will develop beyond the capabilities of its people. And the truth is, a nation cannot be efficient if the public sector is inefficient. I'll take it again. A nation cannot be efficient if the public sector is highly inefficient. Your level of efficiency as a nation will be dependent on the level of efficiency of your public service. Okay, and the public service goes back to the quality of your people, the mechanism, your models, model operandi, and the likes of it. Okay, let's look at the last but not the least future of the PPP is that the asset at the end of the day reverts to government. The private partner or entity would never own the public asset to perpetuity. Okay, even when you do the arrangement, when you build, you own, you operate, and you transfer the boat, you still have to transfer back to the government. Okay, so at the end of the concession, the asset transferred back to government. Okay, and look at that in Nigeria, the second Niger bridge. It took about 25 years, but definitely after the concession, the asset reverts back to the federal government. That is one thing that we need to know about the PPP. Is an interesting, it's a revolving arrangement which has helped, because talking about building resilient trade system, you can take away the role of efficient infrastructure. And the word is not talking about efficient infrastructure alone in terms of transport infrastructure. The word is even talking about the digitalization of this infrastructure, okay, which is another level. And that's where we are. We can take away the role of AI coming in, taking a play around supply chains, global trade system, transport system, and even other sectors globally. Okay, so let's look at the various PPP models that we have on the continent. We'll take a short commercial break and we'll be right back. Thank you.
At Armor Gates Training, we believe professional development should do more than inform. It should transform how people work, lead, and deliver results. That's why we support organizations through conceptual insight, practical learning, and performance evaluation right at the intersection of leadership, strategy, and institutional transformation. Our approach focuses on practical learning format that professionals can immediately apply in their workplace. At Armor Gate, we don't teach theory alone. We equip participants with real-world insight drawn from almost 2 decades of organizational transformation experience. Our programs combine multiple learning methods designed for real-time measurable results. Through seminars, we facilitate deep conversation on key subjects. Using group exercises, participants collaborate, reflect, and think strategically. With case studies, they then sharpened analytical and decision-making skills using real industry scenarios. Through relevant videos, we spark insightful discussions using relatable real-life context. All in all, every participant develops an individual work plan, ensuring the learning turns into real action after the program. Our training programs are hosted in world-class venues across global cities, including Addis Ababa, Nairobi, Mombasa, Cape Town, Dubai, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, London, Florida, and Washington, D.C. Let's work with you to turn learning into your organization's growth. For more inquiries, call +234 807 9574 151 or WhatsApp +1 610 504 6026. Visit www.thearmorgate.org. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Armorgate. Armorgate Training, transforming knowledge, interaction, and growth.
Thank you for staying tuned. It is developing resilient global trade system on Armorgate Radio Communications. For joining us, thank you so much for joining. Today we are discussing the power of public-private partnerships in building resilient trade systems. And what we have spoken so far, we have spoken about what it means, the public-private partnership, about the arrangement, contractual arrangement, agreement between the public sector, the public entity, the public government, and the private entity, private partners, or private firms. And we have also looked at the key features of the PPP before we went on that short break. And we said we're going to talk about the various models of the PPP. Okay, and African countries will use a variety of these PPP models, but depending on the sector involved, manufacturing, energy, depends on the sector involved, or the regulatory environment, and also the financing need. So it depends. There are various models today we'll talk about. I think we should be able to take about 7 thereabouts of those models. We'll talk about it today. Various models, but it depends on the financing aid, depends on the sector or the regulatory environment that will determine which of these models that government would adopt. So let's start with the basic, which is the BOT. It is called the Build, Operate, and Transfer. Very simple. Here the private partner, finances, builds, and operates an asset for a concession period, and after that, what the private entity does is to transfer back to government, and the concession period, that period will be dependent on the agreement stated in the contract. But here what you just do is to build, operate, and you transfer. Okay, examples in Nigeria, we have the Lekki Deep Sea. It has been developed through this kind of concession arrangement. And also in Egypt, we have the New Cairo wastewater treatment plant, which was developed under a build, operate, transfer framework, and it is often named as one of Africa's most successful water sector PPPs. So in the BOT, you build, you operate, and you transfer. Let's look at another model that countries are adopting across the continent. Is in this case just like the BOT, but the difference is that there is an own aspect. Okay, so it is a build, own, operate, and transfer. So the private partner owns and operates the assets during the concession period and transfers ownership at the end. Now, unlike the BOT, you could ask, what's the difference? You build, you operate and transfer. The transfer is that during the concession period, there's no way you are allowed to own. You are not legally bound to own. You build, you operate, and you transfer. But in this arrangement, you can build, you own for that period of time. So if it's a period of 30 years, 3 decades, or a period of 40 years, or 25 years, 2.5 decades, you are going to build, you are going to own that property for that period of time. Then you operate it, then you transfer back at the end of the concession period. Do we have countries that have done this? Yes, we have Uganda. The Bugajili hydropower station was developed through this kind of arrangement, and it involved private investors and development, finance institutions. We also have that in Kenya, where several independent power projects like the Rabai power plant employ these arrangement. So you can see across the globe, we have countries employing either, we have some that we have employment 2-3 arrangement as the case may be. We'll talk about it. Okay, then we also have the BOO. You build, you own, and you operate. So this private entity or the firm will build, we own, and operate infrastructure within a transfer requirement. Yes, we have South Africa. Remember, we mentioned South Africa earlier. They have that renewable energy project and process through the renewable energy independent, power producing procurement program, often looking like the BOO arrangement. We have the private sponsors retaining ownership. Yes, we have countries that have deployed this. Yes, we have Morocco. We have the Nouakchott solar complex incorporating significant private sector participation in ownership and operation. Yes, we also have the fourth one, the concession model. Under this concession model, this is an arrangement where the government grants a private firm or company or party or the entity the right to operate and maintain infrastructure, often collecting a user fee. Okay, yes, we have countries that are adopting this. We have the Senegal, the Dakar Diamandio Toll Highway. In Senegal, they operate a concession arrangement, and of course, in Côte d'Ivoire, we have the Henri Conan Bedier Bridge, which was developed and operated through a concession agreement. Okay, now in this agreement, remember, you just have to, what you ought to do is right to operate and maintain, and often collecting the user fee. Now let's look at another one that I could have. I've mentioned it earlier too, when I was talking about the futures of the PPP, the public-private partnerships, is the DBFO. You design, you build, you finance, and you operate. So it allows the private sector to design, to construct, to finance, and and operate. The operation responsibilities are saddled, with the private entity. And what government does is that payments are usually tied to performance. Okay, and like I mentioned earlier too, we have South Africa, incorporating the DFO, the DBFO principles in their design, build, finance, operate in the Go Train project. Okay. And we also have in Ghana, we have some urban infrastructure and transport projects that have adopted this approach, the DBFO. You design, you build, you finance, and you operate. Okay, we also have the sixth one that you could have is the management contract. Here government retains ownership and investment responsibility, while a private operator manages the service. So in this case of a management contract, government would retain ownership and investment responsibility. It lies solely with the government. What the private entity does is just to manage the service. So do we have countries that are looking at this? Yes, we have Uganda, where the water utility reforms, involve management contract with international operations for the National Water and Sewage Corporation. And of course, Tanzania too is not left out. We have utility management contract which have been used in water sector reforms efforts. Okay, the seventh one is the LDO. You lease, you develop, and you operate. And yeah, what it just does is that the private sector, the entity, leases an existing public asset, upgrades it, and operates it. Yes, it's so simple. It's not really complex. Okay, and we have countries also leveraging on this, and we have countries like Nigeria. We have countries like Kenya also adopting this on some of their projects. So if you look at it, there are various ways. I've mentioned about 7 that nations, government can leverage, partner with the private sector, because the infrastructure deficit, the financing deficit is huge in Africa. And when you talk about building resilient global trade systems, you can achieve that without well-developed and efficient, responsive, trade systems, infrastructure, and in place. This is very important. So why are we advocating for this? Yes, these are the various models. We mentioned the various, key features, characteristics of the PPP arrangement. Why are we saying that nations can leverage on these? Why do you think they can optimize this arrangement? Is that it allows the private sector provide quality service. Allow the private sector play to their strengths. And yet allows the public sector to focus on its core. The government can focus on planning, policy, and regulation, and while the private sector can play to its strengths. At the end of the day, you have a win-win situation for both parties, both the public sector and the private sector. And one of the advantages that would accrue to a nation when you adopt the PPP model is that there will be more funding, increase of more funding for infrastructure. Having project financed by the private sector helps to spread project costs for a longer period of time. As a result, the limited resources, the funds that the government has, will be used for investment in other sectors where private investment seems difficult or would seem inappropriate. Let's even look around the globe, the continent, and see what is happening in the Lekki Deep Sea Port, in Lagos, Nigeria. The proposed mode is the BOOT, and the build, own, operate, transfer. It's going to reduce the need for direct government funding. Look at the project, was projected to cost about 1.5 billion, and while the estimated economic impact is expected to bring about $361 billion within the next 45 years, over the next 45 years. And it's also said that the kind of jobs directly and indirectly, and this will build about 150,000 jobs. So you see the impact. There'll be more financing for infrastructure. The little resources that government has will be able to diversify into other sectors where funding by the private sector might be difficult or seem inappropriate. What's another merit of using this arrangement is that there will be improved in trade and logistics efficiency. There will be improving the efficiency of trade and logistics. Let's even take a look at Lagos, Nigeria. We have the Lagos Port and Container Terminal concessions. And what has this done for us? That it has improved cargo handling efficiency. Definitely congestions at the port will be reduced, and it has to talk about time being money in the business environment. Any delay would have multiplier effect on bottom lines, on profitability margins. And also increase level of turnaround times for vessels. And it's so important that for this, because 90%, almost about 90% of Nigeria's containerized cargo passes through the Lagos port. So something as critical as that needs to be run efficiently. And Nigeria is said to be the West Africa's commercial gateway, and this will help to strengthen its role. What's another advantage of this is that there will be an expansion of energy access and reliability. Yes, reliability is very key. Energy access is key, because another example is the Uganda Bujagali Hydro Power Project. And what this has done, the partnership with the private sector, what it has done is that it has led to an increase in electricity supply. Definitely, once you have stable power supply, there's no need for diesel, there's no need for fuel for generating set, and improved level of power supply, constant power supply, will lead to an increase in production, increase in industrial growth, increase in employment level, increase in export, and of course we talk about increase in economic growth. That's the kind of multiplier effect that has would always have on an economy. As at the time it said that the installed capacity was about 250 MV, and this actually doubled Uganda's electricity generator capacity even at commissioning. And even during the construction of this hydropower project, it had about 4,000 Ugandan were employed. And you know what that would do to the PCI, the per capita income of Uganda. And also, we cannot be overemphasized that stable power supply is crucial for manufacturing, logistics, and supply chains. And this will also help to enhance the export competitiveness level of a nation, which is also a very important element in international trade. And of course, is there any other merit? Of course, value for money and efficiency. We have in South Africa the Renewable Energy IPP program, popularly known as the REIPPPP. Of course, competitive procurement will encourage cost reduction, and it's introducing innovation and performance-based delivery, and this will lead to accelerated renewable energy deployment. That's a whole lot, that accrues to a nation where you get your PPP right. Wow, this is all we can take on today's episode. I will have to draw the curtain here. It has been an interesting session for me. And we'll continue discussion next week on next Friday by God's grace, where we'll talk about other merits, advantages that a country or nation enjoys under the PPP arrangement. And we'll look at successful case studies. What did they do right? We'll also look at PPP arrangements that failed. What are those lessons that we can draw from them? We'll take this discussion further. If we cannot wrap it up next episode, we'll take it further, 2 episodes from now, 2 weeks away. I would enjoy us to subscribe to our YouTube channel for those who have not subscribed, and for if you have any questions, feedback for us, the mail is contact@thearmorgate.org, and you can check us up on our social media handles. Is Armorgate on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram is Armorgate. And remember to join my colleagues next week, Monday to Thursdays. Very intriguing, informative episodes, programs that you will learn from. And for those who have missed other programs of mine, I get feedback that I missed this particular episode. Where can I get it? You can just get it, just subscribe, go to our YouTube channel. You have over a lot of episode videos uploaded that you can just enjoy with the comfort of your office or home. I would like to drop this with us. When I was talking, I spoke about it. I always say that no nation can grow beyond the competencies. No firm can go beyond the competencies of its people. So same thing, that no nation can grow beyond the competencies of its people. A nation cannot be efficient if its public sector is inefficient. A nation cannot be efficient. A nation cannot operate optimally. A nation cannot optimize its full potentials if the public sector is highly inefficient. So we're going to look at this and remember to take it further. Thank you so much. It was good having you, finding your way to your devices today. I would wrap it up here. Do have a beautiful, relaxing, enjoyable weekend. Bye for now. I remain Titilola Ogushona.
Armorgate, founded in 2008 out of a desire to build transgenerational structures for organizations, institutions, and nations. We have worked with large businesses, international development organizations, and public sector ministries and agencies. Armorgate, our uniqueness is that we do not just work for you, we work with you. For example, we do not leave you to the task after sourcing talent that will help the new hire settle into robust leadership development programs. We are technical experts expert in advising and supporting institutions on strategy and leadership, artificial intelligence, strategic human resource management, public sector reform, finance, audit and tax, FAT, and strategic communications. We do all this and more out of a desire to transform nations through institutions and organizations. For further inquiries, email contact@thearmorgate.org or call +234 810 999 6666, +234 807 957 4151, and +161 0504 6026. www.thearmorgate.org. Armorgate, building to endure and transforming nations through institutions and organizations.